I'm here to talk today about how platforms affect enterprise communications and how having a communication system that is a platform rather than a siloed system that is pre-built and doing a single function is the kind of the future of where communications are going. So in the beginning, in communications, we had the telegraph, and this was kind of the very beginning of telecommunications and online. And telegraphs originally were seen as a novelty, and they weren't used by businesses until a couple of enterprising people said, hey, we can get a business advantage by getting information from one place to another much faster. And at the time, that was, the telegraph systems were extreme silos, to the point that different countries' telegraph systems didn't work together at all. Different companies would set up a telegraph system, and they were the only one that had access to the telegraph, and they could only talk to one other endpoint on the telegraph system. We moved on to the PSTN and the phone network, and as Dean said earlier, the phone network, the phone call hasn't changed in 120 years. It's still a siloed system. You have a phone call, it comes in, there's not a whole lot you can do with that call. There's not much that other systems can come in and connect to that call. We brought in the PBX, it was probably one of the next innovations in the telephone system, so now I can have a phone system in my premise. We've had PBXs for a very, very long time, and they still have not changed other than adding features. Oh, well, now I can have voicemail. Now I might be able to have some light presence on there that everybody ignores and nobody uses. But there hasn't been a whole lot of ways to connect those to existing business processes and think about what is in there. You had instant messaging come in. AOL, instant messaging. Anyone never use AOL instant messaging? Anyone still use it? Closed system, locked down, not much you could do with it. In the enterprise, same time. Lotus same time, IBM same time. Again, not a whole lot of use there. Again, a locked down, closed system, not a whole lot of integration points into places that you could tie into that. Email systems. Who had an MCI mail address? Nobody? CompuServe, Prodigy, anyone still use those?
Bloomberg.
Okay. Do you still have the Bloomberg?
I don't use
Okay.
messaging, but
Yeah.
200,000 people.
Right, that's still one of the only places where it is a closed system, but that's largely a regulatory need. So it's a closed system, it's a closed email system, because of regulatory compliance needs and tying things together. All of these things and all of these closed silo systems have been eaten by platforms, and they're being destroyed and taken over by communication systems that are similar, but are platforms that other people can develop on and you can connect things into. So all the closed email systems were taken over by SMTP mail, an open standard that anyone can connect to, and it is a platform. I can develop things, I can write code to send emails, I can have emails that come in and trigger business processes, and I can build things on top of email where I couldn't with something like MCI mail. In the messaging space, you have, instead of same time being the big messaging application, you now have Slack and HipChat and Cisco Spark and tools like that are developer friendly, that people can build on, that people can add to and integrate with and interact with. So the reason this is happening in communications and the reason that enterprises are making these changes, part of it is a top-down push. So a company has a need to customize something. I have a workflow, I have a system where I need to customize my communications, whether it's for a regulatory need or whether it's for archival or capture or even just the ability to control security, who can see things. So the customizations start to drive a lot of that. And then also the need to integrate different tools and data. If I need to send out a massive number of email messages to all of my customers to let them know that an appliance that I'm building has been recalled, doing that through a closed system would have been difficult to impossible. A lot of copying and pasting messages and sending things out over and over again. Or I'd have to rely on my vendor to build a system that allowed me to do mass messaging for me. Instead, what I can do now with an open platform like email and SMTP is I can go to an email service provider who has built a system where I can push in a bunch of email messages, a bunch of email addresses and the message, and push that out to people, including customizing the message and sending things out. So that need to integrate my other business tools and my business data is one of the things that's really driving this shift for communications moving to a platform. And then also the need to automate business processes. So rather than everything that happens to have communications that is a business process, instead of me having to manually do each of those things, going back to the old telegraph operator where when I needed to send a stock quote to someone else, I would have to have somebody type in that stock quote and send it along. Being able to automate those business processes and send things. And stock quotes were actually one of the very first automated communications business processes that were out there. There was a stock ticker system that was developed for the telegraph to send those things across. Then there's a lot of bottom-up drivers that are happening. So rather than the enterprise pushing on the top and saying, these are why we're going to integrate, there's things that are happening from the employee level and from the customer level that are driving enterprises to make these changes. Bring your own device is something that's been happening for a long time, and we're now starting to see bring your own communications. So where employees are showing up at work and saying, the communications tools that you're giving me are broken, they're not able to suit the needs that I have, so I'm going to go use something else. That consumerization of IT is one of the things that's driving that as consumers start to realize, as employees realize that I've got all these great tools outside of work, I'd like to use those at work as well. The tools that I have at work feel 20 years old and outdated and I can't do anything with them. So they bring in their own communications apps, things like Skype, things like WhatsApp, and they start using those. That need is showing, that need for their employees to use something different is starting to show enterprises that they need to make changes and use richer tools and more interesting tools. Enterprises need to stop that from happening. A lot of times that communications needs to stop happening because they're getting data leakage. I have employees sending data out over all these unknown networks that I can't control. There may be regulatory reasons for that, where the enterprises are saying, my data is going out over WhatsApp and Skype, and I can't log that. I can't comply with the laws that say that I need to capture and keep that. Internet of Things is a huge driver for this. So there's billions and billions of devices coming along, and robots need to communicate too. They need to talk to each other. They need to talk to people. They need to allow people to talk to the robots. And so that is going to drive a lot of that way to automating. So how do you do this as an enterprise? APIs are a huge one. So obviously the building out APIs, using APIs is what's going to drive this. That could be third-party communications APIs. That can be APIs for your applications that you're using and your vendors that you're bringing in, and also connecting your own APIs and bringing things together. Some of this may require partnerships or armed links partnerships where you're using an API from somebody. The things that this is going to change in the enterprise. So first of all, a lot of enterprises don't realize that a lot of their business problems are really communications problems. They're having trouble communicating, and that's what's causing their business problems. So they start realizing that and looking for communications and efficiencies and ways to automate those and fix those. They'll find places that they need to open, they need to connect existing tools to each other and multiple types of communication systems to each other and platforms in order to solve those, to automate things. A lot of enterprises need to start opening up their own platforms, even if it's just for internal use, so that your own developers can start building things to connect from your internal tools and processes into your communications processes, which obviously means that you're going to need developers, and you're going to need to bring in developers. And this brings risks. So it brings risks to security and availability and uptime. And so you have to learn what that means and how do you manage that risk, and which types of risks are successful. Is it okay that you don't have 99.9% uptime, but you're able to, the work that you're doing, you're able to get things done faster, and so you're able to do more things even with less uptime. Is that okay? And it's also important to realize that communications does not mean telcos. It's not just telecommunications companies and service providers that provide communications. Enterprise provide those as well. And looking at things like text messaging, mobile messaging, machine-to-machine communications. There's roles for telcos in there, but it's not the only place. Telcos aren't the only provider that can provide these. And it's a world that telcos need to start looking at and understanding as well, that if they're looking at just commodities, and if you're a telco just looking at selling minutes, and that's what you're driving, telcos are terrified of becoming, they say, I don't want to be a dumb pipe, I don't like all this OTT. What they're really worried about is commodities, and that those minutes that they're selling is a commodity. And the way to avoid becoming a commodity is to look at what do you own that you can provide to enterprises that's higher up the value chain. What can you give them? And not trying to own everything in the value chain and just trying to own the pieces that you're very, very good at, and letting the enterprises and letting other companies own the pieces and do the pieces that they're very, very good at, and giving the integration points to allow those two things to be connected together and be used together. So I think I'm running out of time here.
Actually, you still have some time if you want.
Oh, do I?
Yeah, if you want.
I can wrap it up now.
Okay. Any question? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions? We have plenty of time, actually. Oh, okay. Here, let me give you the mic for the recording.
One of the advantages of WebRTC is the ability to create signaling that suits the application. So why would that not also be true of messaging being designed to suit the application rather than using some lowest common denominator?
So signaling is one bit, identity is another, and you need both of those together. And well, you need to be able to know who you're talking to and where they're at located and find them. That's where I'm saying that you need, identity doesn't necessarily need to be I know specifically who you are, but you have an identity on the network that I can reach you at and I can find you. And these communications tools that are out there provide a lot of that identity. They provide a lot of things that are pre-built. They provide, rather than going out and building a specific, a WebRTC endpoint, building all my own identity, building all my own signaling, designing everything. If I can use a ready-made platform that does most of that for me, but then plug into the bits that where I need something different and tie into that, can be a huge cost saver for the enterprise. Not every enterprise is going to go out and build their own communication system from scratch and from the ground up.
Yes, but for some applications, it may make sense to have a custom one provided by the software provider. It doesn't have to be a platform. It could, it may well be, whether it's in consumer or business space, that there's a custom communications mechanism built into the oil field maintenance application, which makes absolutely no sense for the financial trading application to have have a mirror of that.
Right, and so one of the places when you're talking about building those custom systems, letting somebody who understands the scale, how to scale services, how to scale connections, how to scale messaging, that's already doing that in another problem domain can be an advantage to doing it in a specific problem domain. So taking something and saying, here's a generic platform that's passing messages, that's handling presence, that's handling audio, that's handling all of these things, and being able to customize and apply that to a very specific problem domain may be a lot easier solution to build and to scale than to build something from the ground up. But in a lot of instances, custom software, not just in communications, but throughout the enterprise. There's reasons to use custom software. There's reasons to use something off the shelf that you can build, and that should be true of communications as well.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you again, Adam. And sorry I missed you earlier.